Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 2, Chapter 8, The Mad Lord of Walther. And if time allows, we can move on past the Mad Lord of Walther to Chapter 9, The Black Maiden. So last week, we see why Lord Belmont never joined the fleet like his father before him, because his mother put him to a blood promise that he will never join the fleet, either as a civilian or an officer ever, or you will die. That's a pretty severe thing for a mother to do to their child. Apparently she's done that to all of his sisters ahead of him. Whenever they do something she doesn't like, she drags them out, puts them to the blood promise, and to prevent them from doing the undesired activity. Whether she's actually done something or is just a hokum piece of bullshit that he is convinced is real is unknown. He sees her doing lots of things that look like magic. It certainly looks like magic, so why isn't this magic any less magical than the other magic? You don't really want to put it to the test. You know, she puts him to the blood promise, and she did the same thing to his sister Lyra, who also wanted to join the fleet. And after that, she begrudgingly set aside her dreams of soaring the stars, started wearing gowns, started doing girly things, yada yada yada. And then, perturbed by this blood promise, he was put to young Stenstrom, I think he's 9 years old at this point, decides to run away from home. He packs up a few items in an ill-thought-out foray into the world that he has experienced very little of. He says goodbye to his sister Virginia, heads off into the city, and immediately things go off the rails. This running away thing is no day at the beach. It's dark, unnaturally dark, and desolate, and lonely, and fetid, and rancid in its apparent arcane properties. He looks up at the sky, the stars are all fucked up, and then he encounters a creepy lady in a fox park, a lady who seems to know him and says she's been waiting for him to come down that road. And the worst thing that could ever happens. She pulls out a knife and says, I'm gonna have to kill you. And she appears remorseful, like she doesn't really want to do it, but is going to do it regardless. He tries to turn on his childhood charms and puts his arms around her waist and begs her not to do it. And she hesitates for a few moments, but then raises the knife. But then something appears next to him, and poof, he's back in his bed. And whether the encounter with the lady in gray at the Fox Park actually happened or not in his mind is unknown. This week, we continue on Chapter 8, The Mad Lord of Walther, and we've heard a lot about the Mad Lord of Walther. He was a childhood hero of Lord Stenstrom. He was also the vigilant hired by Lord Gerald Catherbaum to take down the Fiend of Calvert while he was running amok in Calverton. All the great lords from the north who were brought down to stop him couldn't do it. All the evidencers couldn't find any evidence. All the people who with the gift of stare couldn't stare shit. So Lord Gerald, sick and tired of all the people turning up dead in the alleys, hired this crazy vigilant from the east, the Mad Lord of Walther, and he was effective. He defeated the Fiend in open combat. It was one of the few people to actually see the Fiend and live to tell the tale. So, given the tenets of Chekhov's gun, where if you mention something in a story, it better have some sort of pertinent relevance to the story. So, here we go. The Mad Lord of Walther. Everything. I'm no hack artist, people. You might think that, but I'm not. So if I spend a lot of time talking about something, you bet your bottom boopy it's gonna be in the text somewhere. Well, here we go. Here's the text. Mad Lord of Walther. And if we get done with it fast enough, we'll proceed to Chapter 9, The Black Maidens. Here we go! Ow! Here we go! When Stenstrom was 10 years old, he and his entire family went into the Barbary north-ester city of Rustum for a family gathering. His mother's side of the family had a grand get-together every 5 years to celebrate the ongoing history of the Tyrol line, to sing their historical praises and confirm once again why Tyrols are Tyrols and not simply an offshoot of the standard Ester line. His immediate family was fairly large, consisting of his parents, himself, his 29 sisters, coupled with his aunts, uncles, brothers-in-laws, cousins, creating a veritable army of people to seat and feed. The Tyrols had rented the entire labyrinth of Rustum for the event, a place of vast gardens and twisting hedged corridors. From barely having contact with anyone outside of Belmont Manor to suddenly being thrust into a swarming mass of people, the get-together was bewildering for Stenstrom. Most of his sisters he barely knew. They were much older and had married and moved on long before he came around, and he only saw them on holidays and special events like this one. He was closest to his youngest sisters, Lyra and Virginia. Lyra had a lovely head of dark black Belmont hair, just like he did, while Virginia had half pewterlock hair, a mix of black and Tyrol pewterlock, which reminded Stenstrom of a marble cake. They sat outdoors in the maze of gardens and hedges, enjoying the mild Rustum weather. Music played, and people laughed as the afternoon wore on. There were many tables set up in the sprawling gardens of the labyrinth to accommodate the near 1,000 assembled Tyrols. An army of staff moved about attending the people. Stenstrom, wearing his finest little boy clothes, sat at the huge feasting table in the center of the labyrinth, with nearly 50 of his sisters, brothers-in-law, and cousins. His parents weren't at that particular table. He hadn't seen them in some time. He assumed they were off, mingling with the other family members. Stenstrom sat somewhere in the middle of the table, flanked by Lyra and Virginia. Lyra's plate was only partially filled as she looked about, trying to see if she could recall the names of all these people she barely knew. "Oh, there's Celesta over there," she said, "and I think that's her husband. What's his name?" "I don't know," Stenstrom replied. Virginia was fully tucked into her heavily loaded plate of food and wasn't listening. She leaned over her plate. A huge bib was stuffed into her gown. These Tyrol get-togethers were normally rather dull, just a lot of people eating and talking. However, it wasn't long before the proceedings were brutally interrupted. A group of armed men appeared from nowhere, wafting in and covering the hedged exits. They pointed all manner of swords and pistols at the people seated at the table. The staff that happened to be around hit the deck and put their hands over their heads. Stopped playing. Someone screamed for help. The sky grew odd, turned a frightening blackish blue color, and soundless lightning flashed. "Shh! Quiet now," came a commanding voice and a hard dirge. "Don't move. Don't move." The screams muffled and then stopped altogether. The dirge kept them quiet and still, all those seated at the table appearing as unwilling statuary. With that, the leader of the villains wafted in with aplomb. He was a broad, portly man wearing a red coat and a garish hat. His thick black beard looked like it was composed of animal fur rather than mere facial hair. He looked about and smiled. "Afternoon, darlings," he said in a flamboyant accent. "I hate to be a bore, but we are to be robbing you of your valuables. I promised my mistress I would be paying the lot of you a visit, and she is most keen on it. In fact, it's Lord Sedgwick of Gold," Lyra mouthed under her breath, unable to fully move or speak under the influence of his dirge. "It's the pirate of Remnath." Virginia was frozen, open-mouthed, with a fork full of saucy meat halfway in flight to her mouth. "What's he want with us?" she mumbled. Someone else arrived, a tall woman wearing gray ladies' garments and slim button-up boots. She didn't waft in. Rather, she walked in from far away, it seemed, across the dark sky, arriving like a goddess. Stenstrom didn't understand what he was seeing. Things didn't quite make sense. Time and distance were distorted. The woman's face was mostly obscured by her large, flat-brimmed hat. Stenstrom could see hints of a pointy chin, but that was about it. He'd seen her before. In a dream, he thought. She looked around and spoke in a ghostly voice. "He's here, at this table. Fetch him for me. I want him alive." Lord Sedgwick listened to her instructions intently. She then walked away, covering miles across the odd sky, and was gone. When she left, the sky cleared and things appeared to melt back into normalcy, except for Lord Sedgwick's armed pirates roaming about. Sedgwick pushed his hat away and wiped his beefy brow. "Well, you have heard it. Therefore, we're to be robbing the lot of you and kidnapping someone in particular. We shan't inconvenience you any longer than necessary, but make no mistake, puddings, do not attempt any heroic use of weapons or gifts. I warn you. I would hate to have to shed blood here today. Got it? Huh?" Lord Sedgwick's men fanned out and, holding open bags, began taking items of value, removing rings, necklaces, brooches, watches, and anything else they could find that looked valuable. They also leaned over and inspected the faces of all the young men seated at the table. "Who are you looking for, Sedge?" one of them called out. "A boy. Should be around 10 or 12, I think. Look for the puffy ones." The men began searching anew, carefully inspecting all the young boys. Mother, help us," his sister Lyra said, calling for help. Now, came a reply. "Let's keep this amongst ourselves, shall we?" It was Lord Sedgwick. He had heard her whisper. Lyra fumed. The passing tide of ruffians approached, robbing some, pawing others. They were just a few place settings down. "Check that kid over there," one of them said, pointing as he worked to get a large ring off of one of his sister's fingers. The dirty brute turned to Stenstrom. And then there was a blast from the near end of the labyrinth. A man appeared in a cloud of wind. He was wearing a blue and green coat, black pantaloons, black bucket boots with spurs, and a Vith-style triangle hat. Lyra and Stenstrom, unable to move their heads, turned their eyes towards him. The man was wearing a jeweled mask over a well-trimmed mustache. "Dear Sedgwick," he said in a proud voice, "this is a low one even for you. Interrupting these good people's dinner." "It's the Mad Lord of Walther," Stenstrom thought. He and Lyra had thrilled to his exploits in the vids and posts for years. He was a notable vigilant from the West, and here he was in the flesh. Sedgwick grinned. "Everywhere I go, I find you close behind Walther, sniffing my wind. Kill him!" he yelled to his underlings. "Kill this fool dead! Dead! Dead!" They dropped what they were doing and produced a rusty assortment of weapons and attacked with a shout. The Mad Lord smiled and threw himself into action. "Hide, you people," he said in a commanding dirge. "Protect yourselves." No, stay where you are," Cole dirged back. Stenstrom felt sick as the two dirges clashed and competed in his head. "I said hide, and that's final." The Mad Lord's dirge ripped into their heads as he clashed steel with the first of many henchmen to reach him. They were free. Stenstrom was seized by his collar and pulled under the table by his sister Lyra. Virginia landed at his side with a whoof, still wearing her bib. The whole family had thusly taken refuge. Stenstrom couldn't see much from under the table. He saw many pairs of booted and shoed feet moving about in confusion, some running in various directions, others wafting in and out in a cloud. He could hear weapons discharging, shouts and curses, and steel clashing. He could see the Mad Lord's spurred boots mixed in with the other pairs. He could taste the dust that was being kicked up. A pair of boots suddenly were yanked out of sight, followed by a rough crash on the tabletop above them. A limp hand bounced into view, lightly clutching a Hit 6 Fradlock pistol. Lyra quickly grabbed it and placed it in her sash. People wafted in and out in sprays of wind. Men collapsed, some apparently pummeled, others shot or stabbed by the Mad Lord. The sound of fists crunching into faces and biting steel echoed. Shod feet approached at the run. "Duh! Take hostages, kill a few!" a henchman yelled. He looked under the table. There was his wide-eyed, scruffy face. "Wait! He's here! Here's the kid we're looking for," he said as he reached out for Stenstrom. Lyra pulled the gun from her sash and shot the man in the chest. Another henchman arrived and knelt down. "What'd you say, Todd?" he cried. He saw Stenstrom. "Ah!" he gurgled as Lyra again fired her gun. The pirate fell next to the first man. She put two protective arms around Stenstrom and Virginia, ready to fend off any further attacks. "You people could help me, you know," came a dirge from the Mad Lord. Now that they were dirged free by the Mad Lord, lots of daggers were flying around the yard, sent by Stenstrom's older sisters, as well as gunfire and swordplay from his brothers-in-law and cousins. "Damn you! Damn you lot!" Cold cried as a cloud of daggers flew in his direction. He wafted away, leaving his men to their fate. Eventually, after a good deal of jostling about and noise, things got quiet in a hurry. Pockets of fallen men lay everywhere. Men babbled in pain. Some called for their mothers. "Hold fast, you," somebody said. "Oh, do drop your weapons and sit down, will you?" the Mad Lord dirged. All around, people dropped their weapons and plopped down to the ground as ordered. Nobody able to match the Mad Lord's dirge. A single pair of boots approached the table, spurs jingling with each step. The man knelt down, the leather of his boots creaking. There he was, the Mad Lord of Walther, hardly even out of breath after all that ruckus. He inspected the dead henchman. Finally, "Everyone all right under here?" Stenstrom looked at him, the hat, the mask, the glittering eyes, the handsome face underneath. Stenstrom thought, "He's not a man, he's a machine, a robot. Look!" For a moment, the Mad Lord's face appeared gilded and jeweled, like a high-quality mannequin made of delicate silver and bits of inlaid gold. But after a second glance, the Mad Lord appeared as nothing more than flesh and blood. "What are these contretemps?" Lyra gasped. "Where are the sisters? This is an outrage." "It comes with the territory, my lady." He kicked at the dead henchman. "Did you do that?" "I did." "Well done. You Tyrols are always so full of surprises. You and your lot fought well. I'll ask again. Are the three of you all right?" Yes, we're fine," Lyra said, holding on to Stenstrom. "They were after my brother." "Were they?" The Mad Lord looked at Stenstrom and did a double take. Something about the young lad appeared to have gotten his attention. He shook his head and smiled. "Well, what do you know? You're a fine fellow. What's your name?" "Stenstrom," he replied quietly. "Well, Lord Stenstrom, keep a clear head and grow up fast, will you? I'm getting too old for this." "What in the name of creation is that supposed to mean?" Lyra said, protective of her brother. The Mad Lord stood. "It means exactly what I said. Good day." And he vanished with a mighty blast as the crowd of shouting people and their mother and father arrived through the hedge. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 8, The Mad Lord of Walther. So, in case you were wondering, one of the gifts of the mind, which is generally a Vith thing, usually non-Vith people can't do these things, but the Mad Lord of Walther and Cedric of Cold are special cases, exceptions, if you will. The Dirge is one of the gifts of the mind. It's basically very similar to the voice in the Dune book series. It's you can say something And the force of your mind, the force of your will compel whoever listens to do what you command. It's a battle of wills. If your will is stronger than the will you're trying of the person you're trying to dirge, then you can command them. Sigillus of Metatron, used the dirge in Book 1 to great effect. You don't see it too often, and a lot of these gifts of the mind are there, but you're not really supposed to use them that much. Like, if you're a dirgist, as they're called, you can get in a lot of trouble using the dirge too much if you put people in compromising situations. If you dirge somebody and then they complain, especially to the sisters, and the sisters find merit in their complaint, a dirgist can find themselves in prison, and Hagthorpe prison. That's the usual place where they go. But both the Mad Lord of Walther and Sedgwick of Cold have the dirge, and the Sedgwick of Cold was dirging them, hey, just freeze, don't move. But then the Mad Lord shows up and he's like, hey, everybody hide, take cover while I kick some ass here. And the Mad Lord's dirge was stronger than Sedgwick of Cold's dirge, so they had to do what the Mad Lord said. So that's what was going on there. So the Mad Lord arrives after Sedgwick of Cold and his men arrive, and this creepy lady in gray. So again, as we saw in the previous chapter, here she is again, and there's no question this time it's not a dream. It's there she was. And again, with her comes strangeness. The sky gets weird, the perceptions change, the constellations change, and she walks in across the sky and gives Sedgwick of Cold some commands and then walks away across the sky. At least that's what it appears to Stenstrom that she was doing. And she was after him again. Find this boy and bring him, bring him to me, basically. And so apart from robbing the Tyrol's blind, they were also out to abduct Stenstrom. But the Mad Lord shows up and foils Lord Cold's scheme. And when he sees Lord Belmont, young Lord Belmont, 10 years old, he sees something in him. And he's like, wow, what do you know? I was trying to figure out what accent to use for the Mad Lord. I think I used a variety of accents. I failed. That's a fail. It's a miserable fail. But there it is. We actually see the Mad Lord in person. He seems like a standard swashbuckling, heroic type. Doesn't seem like a bad fellow. Obviously, he's quite skilled. He was able to handle all of Lord Cold's men all by himself. Has a pretty good dirge, obviously. So that's he brings it in both legend and in deed. Anyways, so that is that chapter. Next chapter, we're going to see Lady Jubilee once again reacting to perceived threats. And we've heard all about Tyrol's sorcery and how Stenstrom was trained by his mother to use Tyrolese sorcery. Well, here we go. We're going to actually see some of it. Once again, Chekhov's gun. I mentioned something, and now here it is in the story. I forget nothing, and don't you ever forget it. So, only 27. Let's go ahead and let's read Chapter 9 of the Black Maidens, and we'll learn a few more things and see some more interesting happenings in Stenstrom's young adulthood, or young childhood, I should say. Well, immediately after the incident at Rustum Labyrinth with Lord Sedgwick of Cold, Mother's demeanor became even more frantic than normal. He overheard his mother and father talking in the parlor the next evening. The Weregild is on in earnest, and she's coming at our children. Our children! No, I heard she's mortally sick, on her deathbed. Then she has helpers. Assassins! We have to take steps. I will take steps. The next morning, Stenstrom, Lyra, and Virginia were taken down to a small Marian ruin near an outcropping of rock. Mother was solemn. The attack on us at Rustum has proved to me, yet again, that the enemies of our house are many, and will not hesitate to come at you, our children. Therefore, it is time to begin your training. Lyra has some pre-indoctrination to it, so she is a little ahead." "What training?" Virginia asked. "Training in matters not spoken of outside these grounds. Tyrol sorcery." She laughed. My friends in the city told me Tyrol sorcery is a myth." Mother raised her hands and shook them. 6 silver daggers appeared between her fingers. She approached Lyra and held them to her throat. "And are these not real, my daughter?" She shook her hands again, and the daggers vanished. "As I have done for your sisters before, I will teach you as well. When you have mastered these skills, never again will you be defenseless. Never will you be disarmed. You shall walk unseen. No lock shall hold you, and no truth shall bind you." She produced out of thin air several brightly colored balls. One was a magenta purple, one that was speckled in silver, and the last was solid black. "What are those?" Stenstrom asked. "Holy stones," Mother said. "I am determining if we're being watched." She placed the holy stones on the flat surface of one of the Marian telescopes. She watched them for a moment. They just sat there, glinting in the afternoon sun. Stenstrom stared at the holy stones. They almost looked good enough to eat, like large gumballs. Far away, someone trimmed the lawns west of the manor. "Good," she said at last, apparently satisfied. She produced an odd-looking key and thrust it into the hidden slot into the rock face. A narrow door opened, sliding inwards. "Through here," she said, leading them down into the darkness beyond. "Be careful with your footing." Where are we going?" Virginia asked, hesitant of the dark. "The culverts. They run for miles. Once they were just below the surface, taking the drainage water from the esterlands to the sea. Now they lay covered up in layers of modern stone and metal framing and are forgotten. The water long since dried up. It is here, in these trackless, forgotten spaces, that I shall teach you all you need to know." "Like Constance?" Stenstrom asked, recalling Constance's seemingly mystical abilities on the night she went Carofab. "Indeed." They made their way down a narrow stone staircase, the air quickly becoming cool and damp. Light blossomed. Mother was holding something in her hand that created a soft yellow light. "Continue down. Quickly. No dawdling." Stenstrom could see a vast artificial cavern stretching off into the gloom as they exited the staircase. The floor was a flat U-shaped basin about 200 feet wide. The roof, about 20 feet above them, was a confusion of metal lattice and buttress work. It was amazingly quiet in the depths. Feet crunching on grit and crushed stone, they walked into the dark for a ways until they came upon a small area that had been cleared out. Stone slabs were arranged in a circle. A line of several large chests sat in the darkness nearby. "You will find several robes in the first chest on the left. I want you to put them on." Lyra opened the chest and pulled out 3 white robes. She passed them out, and they scattered into the darkness and changed. When they returned, Mother was sitting on a slab, smoking her usual cigarette. Her face lit up in the orange glow of her coal. Her hand was shaking. They seated themselves around her, and she began. "You must know by now that your mother has made enemies over the years, some more dangerous than others. I believe these enemies are seeking to harm me through you." "You're talking about Lord Sedgwick of Cole, the man who attacked us in the labyrinth?" Lyra asked. "Yes, and perhaps others as well." "We aren't helpless, Mother," Lyra said. "Are you? You've no idea what awaits beyond the safety of the manor grounds. It's time to grow up and face the world, and you must have these skills." "Again, Mother," Virginia said, uncharacteristically defiant, "they say there is no such thing as Tyrol sorcery." Mother smiled and took a pull from her cigarette. Stenstrom looked at the glowing of the coal, orange-red in the dark. Suddenly, Mother vanished. "Mother?" he said, his voice lost in the quiet vastness of the culvert. "They know nothing in the city," they heard Mother's voice say from the shadows. They looked around, and there was Mother again, sitting right where she was previously. "As I was saying, you three have much to train." She set up a brass tripod with a pot hanging under it and started a fire. She tossed in a handful of something granular, and the fire leapt up, turning purple. "You shall learn the ways of nature and of the elements, how they relate, how they react with one another. And I'm not simply talking about chemistry. I'm talking about herbalism, Kabbalism, all the things of the hidden natural world that the sisters seem to find so repugnant. I am going to teach you these skills that shall protect you. You will learn to walk unseen past both living and non-living eyes. No lock shall hold you, no locked door shall hinder you as well. So, it is time to begin. First, I am going to introduce you to some friends that you shall become very familiar with. I am going to summon spirits that will guard and keep you safe." "What spirits?" Lyra asked. Mother smoked her cigarette. "Spirits your elder sisters are quite familiar with, some more than others. Have you ever wondered why we have no expensive security system installed here in our home? Have you ever considered why we have no private army at hire prowling the grounds as other houses do? That is because we have something better, more seeing, more tireless. We have the Black Maidens. They are manifestations of the spirits of the air. They hover over our grounds, seeing everything. Additionally, they are wonderful chaperones. Once summoned, they will follow you wherever you go. And should you need instant assistance, or should I feel you are in danger, they will spirit you away, back home to me. You three have not yet vexed me much. However, I've been using them on your rebellious sisters for years." Mother continued, "I shall require a bit of your blood, all of you. I need the blood for the summoning. Now pay attention. The Black Maidens are given lease to locate your position via smell and sight. They can detect you at a great distance via smell, and then zoom in precisely by using sight. If your face is covered, they shall not be able to see you. Remember that. Your face must be uncovered." Stenstrom stirred. "Mother, is this really necessary?" She put her cigarette down and held out a small bowl. "Yes, it is. Now, Belle, I shall demonstrate. Give me a bit of your blood." He took the bowl. Mother produced a dagger and cut him in the arm. He bled into the bowl for a few moments, and then she handed him a cloth to tend to his cut. Virginia, watching this, appeared horrified about having to cut herself. Lyra was nonplussed. Mother added various herbs and salts and metals to the bowl of Stenstrom's blood. She poured the contents into a pot and began stirring. This process is very delicate. The potential to go wrong is high. What you want is a Black Maiden, and they are fairly harmless. As Mother stirred, a cloud of steamy smoke issued from the pot. It coalesced into the form of a tall, gaunt, pale maiden with a sunken face. She wore gossamer veils of black that floated about her on phantom winds. She drifted about, tilting one way and then the other. "Please sit next to my son," Mother said. The Black Maiden looked at Stenstrom and in a lilting fashion sat next to him. "See? Perfectly harmless and submissive." Mother crushed out her cigarette and her tone became dark. "Now prepare yourselves." The three sat there looking at the ghostly form sitting next to Stenstrom, and Mother continued, "There are other things protecting our house beyond mere Black Maidens, something cruel and utterly evil. When a Black Maiden encounters someone hostile on our grounds, they summon what I am about to show you. I am going to let you see so that you will know the difference. Dredged up from the shadowlands, from the lightless places, are the soul devourers, hungry, restless, always seeking their next soul to eat. Jubilee added something to the pot, and the smoke coming out of it became dense and choking. They coughed, sickened with it. Something rose up in the distance, backlit in a brackish unlight. It appeared to be a naked female rising up with a ballerina's grace, her lean body perfectly formed. She raised her head. There was no face there, just a huge mouth full of chattering teeth and a seeking, serpent-like tongue. Virginia, and even Lyra screamed. "There is my son," Jubilee said quietly. The soul devourer raised her arms and clenched her hands into grasping claws. "You may have him." The creature shouted with feral passion and sprinted towards Stenstrom, eager to tear into him. "Your soul!" she wailed. Stenstrom sat there horrified. Lyra dashed in front of him, ready to stand and fight the unholy thing. Mother sat there, allowing it to approach. Then she said, "Save my son." And the Black Maiden leaned over and kissed Stenstrom on the cheek. He was instantly teleported home. He spun about. He was all alone in his room. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 9, The Black Maiden. So, we see here how Lady Jubilee was able to bring so many of his older sisters home on a regular basis using Black Maidens. Once dispatched, a Black Maiden can pretty much find you wherever you are. It's a lot of arcane stuff. How is a Black Maiden actually doing these things? You have to give it some dramatic license. But it uses smell, and then it homes in on you with sight. And if it manages to get you or give you a kiss on the cheek, you're teleported instantly back to where it was summoned from. So, and it's usually somewhere at Belmont Manor. It kind of works like the Very Merry of the House of Caroline, now that I think on it. But these Black Maidens are the tools Lady Jubilee has been using to bring his wayward sisters home, especially Calamy. Calamy wasn't very good at eluding these Black Maidens, and they usually got her time and time again. Constance knows how to avoid the Black Maidens, and she even told Stenstrom, "I know how to avoid the Maidens." There's a way to do it. It doesn't always work, and it won't work forever, but it can prolong the chase. And Stenstrom will become intimately aware of that process later on. We are also introduced to soul devourers, creatures of a negative plane of existence, from hell, basically. These horrific creatures that are pretty mindless, that are after your soul. They want to devour your soul right out of your body. And if they get hold of you, they can do that. Usually they don't really play too many games. They're not very stealthy or crafty. They see you and they just go straight for you. And they're usually more than one. There's usually quite a few of them, so that's what makes them dangerous, is it's easy to get overwhelmed, as we will see later on in the story. So we see after the horrific debacle at the Rustum Labyrinth, Lady Jubilee is worried for her children and wants to teach them the secrets of Tyrol sorcery. And we see Stenstrom earlier in the book conjuring things up out of thin air, turning invisible, and picking locks like it's no big deal. And apparently that's what his mother is going to teach him. And it's going to take, as we find out in the next chapter, 9 years to give him all of these skills, him and his two sisters, Lyra and Virginia. So we will continue next week. Part 2, Chapter 10, His Greatest Enemy. So we'll look forward to that. And until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.